Hello everyone and welcome to Atelier La Juntana work and practice presentation. In this lecture we wanted to run you through our making inspiration, and we wanted to get started with this image, which some of you might be familiar with. Is work by British artist Richard Long, which is entitled A Line Made Out of by Walking, and was one of his first works when he was studying in London. He took a train south of London to the middle of the countryside, and he started to walk up and down on a line of grass until he created this kind of path just made by walking, as the title explains. And then he waited for the right moment on the light to take this particular picture, and he presented this as the art of work, as the final piece, just interacting with the environment in a very subtle way. And we think that this is a very powerful way of expressing how you can do a lot by just kind of doing a very subtle interaction with the environment. In the same way, Studio Chad Wright developed this installation called the American Dream Master Plan in 2011, where they, with a very basic vacuum forming technique, they created one single mold which represented the traditional and dream American master plan house. And then they went to the beach, and when the sand was with the right density, they recreated the master plan on the beach and just left the master plan be washed away by the tide. And just the kind of temporary notion of the installation, and at the same time the fragility of it, but also the beauty and the power of the sea destroying the master plan, just done with, again, very basic tools. Just one sheet of plastic that is form molded, and then the sand kind of casted with that shape was enough for him to develop the intervention. And then in the same way, also playing with the environment, Max Lamb developed a number of pewter desks, which is a series of furniture that was done using the beach as the workshop. He went down to the beach again, looking for an area that was with the right consistency, making it slightly wetter than it should be, and then he kind of replicated the traditional technique of metal melting using sand molds and pewter to, as you can see, there is like a number of camping gas small bottles that are buried on the sand with the pans. And then he kind of developed this idea of going to the beach, creating the artwork on the beach, and then leaving no trace once the artwork is done. This is part of the process when the pewter is being kind of poured over a mold that is being done by carving out the sand. And this is one of the pieces that then he will sell in London in galleries and with high demand. And once he goes from the beach, there is no trace. And I really like this idea of kind of doing the best of nature and of interaction as a workshop, because metal foundry is something that sometimes might seem very expensive and kind of very hard to achieve for some people, but if you know the technique and you have the know-how, then it's not that difficult. You can just do it with few tools. Similar project as well, using very basic techniques, is the Assemble British Collective, winner of the Turner Prize a few years ago, which in 2016 created this project called the Barbecue Tiles, which basically consisted on having a number of tiles glazed and then burned with fire naturally, and each one will kind of record the fire in a different way, so they were unique. And it was, again, a very cheap and very kind of affordable and easy way of interacting with materiality in an innovative and quite successful way. Another intervention from Assemble was their installation on the Venice Biennale 2018, where they kind of mixing two different type of clay of different colors. They created a paving for the whole entrance of the Venice Biennale, and yet again another installation from Assemble, doing tiles with the community and then cladding the whole facade of the building with tiles of different colors, which have been produced with the people that were going to use the building. And then, as well as interacting with the environment, we think it's very important to rethink the architectural model, the role of the architectural model, and how the architectural model can engage with the people more than it's doing at the moment. This is a beautiful installation that was exhibited in the Tate Modern in London, which is the city of Beirut, made out of embossing on couch. And this is an installation which was exhibited in Bordeaux by a Dutch firm MVRDB, which was a master plan that was exhibited in one kind of a square and was trying to explain a proposal for the city of Bordeaux through a model. And the model was designed in a way that the width of the streets were wide enough for a person to go through them. So the scale of the model was not to do with the architectural scale, but more to do with the scale of the person that is approaching the installation. It was very successful, and again, it's a very simple technique using silicone molds and resins to create the different geometries. As you can see, the kids could play underneath, which made it even more successful, and then they could see the footprint of the master plan from below, and then there was a fog that was already existing on the square, which made the whole experience quite appealing and engaging. Same Dutch firm MVRDB. This project in this case is in Copenhagen, and it's a project that we had the opportunity to collaborate with them in developing the project and developing a series of models. In this case, these models are large scale models and also prototypes. As you can see, the sitting area where people are gathering and the ping pong table, they were furniture that were intended to be built in reality in the building. And it was a building that was developed in the community of Frederiksberg in the city center of Copenhagen, and it was to kind of create a cultural center for different associations that they didn't have a place to meet and to gather, and this building will bring them together. They came there, they really enjoy playing with the models, and they really enjoy. This is one of the associations is a parkour club, which is a very popular sport at the moment in Denmark, and they were showing us and showing the community what they would need in the building, the type of exercises that they would develop, and creating this sort of engagement through an architectural model. We think it was quite powerful, and we wanted now to give you a bit of an overview on our work, which in a way is related to these inspirational projects that we have shown, but it's also related to what we have been doing in the last few years, experimenting with materials. And this project is a model that we did for the same project that we were showing, the one-to-one models. So it's called Cube, and it's located in Copenhagen. It's already built. This is a series of models that we did using silicone molds and polyester resin stained with different lacquer and different inks. Each one of the ink would have a different color, and then when they combine together, they create this composition. The model was quite successful because it was a tool that was used not only to explain the building and to kind of get an idea of how the volumes would interact together, but also to experiment and to test different color combinations. So we did a number of copies for each one of these pieces, and then we tested different combinations and configurations until we were happy with the color, and that was almost like a game that we were playing with. This is another project that we did again in Denmark as well, in Copenhagen, close to Frederiksberg, which is done with a firm that is called Third Nature, Tredje Natur, and it was a project to repurpose a urban park into a floodable structure that could take flooding water by designing the park with different heights and different areas that are sunken. You could contain the water for the whole neighborhood in case of a heavy rain. We were working with 3 different scenarios: everyday scenario, 10 years scenario, which is the diagram in the middle, and then 100-year scenario, that is the diagram on the right. We were commissioned to develop a number of models that were meant to explain the idea behind the project to the municipality and to the community through public consultation. This is the first series of models, which is 3 models in 1 to 500. They are CNC out of maple wood, and then there is epoxy resin, which is poured over that maple wood. The one on the right is kind of showing again the everyday scenario where there is a bit of water and some canals, then the possibility that you can flood some of the plain areas, and then the final one on the far left is where the whole container wall is acting as a wall that keeps the water inside, and then the whole park can be flooded. This is another image showing the full flooded condition in one of the same models. And then we went one step further and we developed a 1 to 200 model with far more detail than the previous ones, where we were explaining how the park would be used in a flooded condition, showing as well in this kind of series in 1 to 50 how the park could be used for some specific areas. In this case, we are showing the flooding condition and also the people in the everyday condition. So in the same model, you are tackling two different situations, and we are also showing how the model could be used and how the park would be used actually in a flooding condition where you will have some people doing kayak and some people enjoying the water in a different way. This model was done by pouring resin directly over the wood. So first we did the wood base with different layers of maple wood, and then we created a number of silicone wall containers around the wooden base, and then those silicone wall containers were kind of retaining the resin that we will pour then in the middle. The resin was poured in different layers because the resin tends to heat quite a lot, so we need to be careful when we are doing big pourings that is not too much heat release from the reaction. And as you can see, there were no lines in between the blue elements of it. This is another project that we developed in collaboration with the Rosa Rogina in 2017, which was tackling the issue of mines in ex-Yugoslavian countries, which were left in the borders of the countries from the war. And the idea was to highlight the issue of soil pollution through the mines, not only the mines as a danger to the people, but the mines as a danger to the landscape and to the earth. We did a silicone mold out of one of the mines, which was a replica of the actual mine that was buried, that is still buried underground in many places in former Yugoslavian countries. And then we collected from one of those places, in particular the border between Croatia and Bosnia, a number of elements from a minefield area, which we consider that were affected by the presence of those mines, including soil, nature, water, and some buildings that were abandoned because it was not safe to be there. And then using the silicone molds and these elements, we encapsulated all these materials into different mines, and each mine represented one element of nature that was under threat of pollution because of the presence of mines. So the whole idea of the project was to highlight not only the mine as a danger to the life of people and to the life of animals, but also as a danger because it pollutes and because it takes almost 500 years to remove once it's installed. Finally, we have a project that we did in 2018 for the Architectural Venice Biennale in Italy, which was a competition, an open call for ideas for the Montenegrin pavilion within the frame topic of emergent resilient. So we developed a glossary of terms of what emerging resilient in architecture could mean nowadays. And we took that glossary and expressed that glossary through this casted kind of bricks, which you can see here in the image. The idea was that we were creating a workshop and that these bricks were not exhibited from day one altogether, but that the workshop would evolve over time during the duration of the pavilion. So we did this number of silicone molds in our workshop here in Liencres, and then those silicone molds was the only thing that we had to bring to Venice. One of the main costs when you do exhibitions, particularly in Venice, is to bring all the elements there, and most of the environmental footprint of the whole exhibition is the transportation, especially the part that needs to be brought by boat and by water. So we thought that by bringing the silicone molds in small backpacks and bags, we could be much more efficient and then just cast with local materials and develop most of the installation there. So we did the whole glossary collection of silicone molds, which, as you can see, they are backwards because the cast is what we were valuing the most. And then we brought to Venice a very simple set of tools to do the casting, the pigment, and then the plaster, which was a local plaster from a warehouse close to where the pavilion was located. We did a sheet where we were explaining how each one of these molds needed to be done. And then the idea was that people would come to the pavilion, would join, and would start kind of fabricating these copies with us, and they will start populating the wall during the duration of the pavilion. They could either leave it in the pavilion or take it with them, but what they had to do is that each time that they were doing one brick, they will need to write a term on a book as well with their own kind of idea. In this case, this is Atelier Baobao, the Japanese firm doing one brick with us, and they, of course, after left the term in exchange. This is another couple that show up the day of the opening and wanted to have some bricks for themselves, so they did a couple of casts for them. And this is how the wall was getting populated with these kind of concepts that were creating this intervention in the wall. And this is the book with Atelier Baobao signing and putting their concept after the cast was done. And this is it from our side. Thank you very much. Hope you have enjoyed.